welcome to the Karen Kenney Show. This is the place where we take a no bullshit look at life's little lessons. Here, together, we find the spiritual glory in even the most wicked hard story. This is a journey from fear back to love and how we can find our greatest strength and happiness in some of the most unlikely places. I believe that if you're willing to change your mind, you can totally change your life. So, are you ready to rewrite your story and choose to live free? Let's do this. Hey, you guys, and welcome to the Karen Kenney Show. I'm so excited. You can see my pal Bill Baren sitting over here, and this is the part of the show where I do that awkward thing where I talk about him and he just has to sit there and listen. So you guys know I don't normally read people's bios, but this is legit. Like, Bill's like the real deal, and I want to make sure I get it right and don't just spin off into some excitement about why I love him. So I'm going to ground you in some facts about my awesome guest today, Bill Baren. So Bill is the Chief Executive Officer of the Big Shift LLC, and he's the Chief Product Officer of Empowered Education. He is a world-renowned business coach, which I can attest to. More on that in a little bit. He's an educator and a serial entrepreneur. Yeah. He has started and grown 4 different multi-million-dollar businesses and has mentored hundreds of 7-figure CEOs. Over 50,000 people, Jesus, that's a big, over 50,000 people from 22 countries have participated in his online and live trainings. I'm one of them. And he has had a particular passion for helping mission-driven coaches step into their true genius and to make their impact known in the world. He holds a Bachelor of Science, a BS, in Values and Technology with an emphasis on computer science. And you guys, check this out. He also has a Bachelor of Arts in Russian Literature from Stanford. So wicked smarty-pants sitting here, number one. He's also a huge sports fan. I'll say this just for him. Go Warriors and Stanford football. And he loves hosting dinner parties with his beautiful wife, Gia, who you guys, she's a total sweetheart. In his former and past lives, you guys, he's done so many cool things. He's participated in the World Series of Poker, which I definitely want to talk about. He's produced hit songs. He's DJ'd in 5 different countries in front of packed crowds. So you can see my friend here has like done a bunch of wicked cool stuff. And I came to know Bill. I always talk about it like this. So I was on Facebook one day and I saw this dude in a funky hat doing a video talking about business. And, you know, I'd been an entrepreneur, I guess, like it's such a funny thing to even still call myself that, but I had been an entrepreneur, quote unquote, for like 18 years. And I had just taken my business as far as it could go. Like I was like, I need some help. And I just kind of had put it out to my spiritual team. And all of a sudden I see this dude on this video talking about premium packages, success systems. And I'm like, what's up with this dude? And I started to listen to him, and everything he was saying made total sense. And what it was like business with consciousness. And it was all about like his vibe. I'm like, his language sounded to me, very A Course in Miracles-y. And I was like, oh, this dude gets it. Like he's laying down business and explaining business in a way that I could really pick up. It really landed from his heart into my heart. And I wanted to know more. And so I joined Premium Packages Success Systems, got a ton of value out of it. And then I was invited to what's called the Big Shift Experience, which is these incredible weekend retreats that Bill would do. And I learned so much from that Big Shift experience. And from there, I joined his coaching programs, the Big Shift. And he's been my business mentor for over 2 years now. And I just completed the All-Stars program with him. And you guys, he and his team have totally changed the way I look at business. They've changed my life in a significant way. And I'm just a huge fan of Bill Baren. So I'm wicked excited that he said yes to be on the show. I'm thrilled to share him with you. I love him. I think by the end of this, you're going to love him. So Bill Baren, welcome. Long intro to the Karen Kenney Show.
Thank you. It's really interesting. You were saying like you're an entrepreneur. It was like, I read the quotes in it and I was like, I think you're an accidental entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And apparently I'm a serial entrepreneur, and that means
Yes.
I create cereals.
Yeah, well, really funny, because I wanted to talk to you about this. This was one of my questions, because like when I was a kid, not once, like first of all, and I want to talk about your history too, in your background, especially with your parents and stuff like that. But when I was a kid, you know, I was a blue collar kid and everybody had jobs. Nobody was starting their own business, except for like after my mother was killed, we went to go live with an aunt and uncle, and my uncle was a contractor. And he had like his own business, but he had built for other people for a long time. He had done a lot of the buildings and stuff like MIT, Boston University. He had done a bunch of buildings in Boston, but then he kind of went out on his own. And I just remember him like crunching numbers once in a while, but even still it was removed. It wasn't like we came from a people that were entrepreneurs. So I think even when I started my yoga studio and went out on my own, I never identified as a business person. I never really identified as an entrepreneur. And even now it makes me chuckle and laugh, because so much of what I do is just, it's like intuitive, spreading the love, and then I exchange it for money, but I still don't feel like a hardcore business person, if that makes sense, you know?
Yeah. But
yeah, go ahead.
I always find it funny. It's like entrepreneurs are their own sort of breed these days. But like when you really think in terms of the history of time, and I'm actually reading this really cool book. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's called Sapiens. So I'm in the very beginning of the book, but it's really like mapping out the history of humankind, even when, you know, like Homo erectus and Neanderthals and all of that were other humans living at the same time as Homo sapiens, right? And I think about, all right, well, initially, what did we do? Like, we took care of ourselves. We got food, we hunted, we gathered, we traded whatever we got. And that was like the first entrepreneurship. Like, I have access of something and I'll trade you for something else, right?
Yes.
And then like the idea of a job, I mean, that it is a relatively new concept for humankind. It's new. Like, that's not how it was. Like, you like always did some things to make money. Like, I even think about like newsboys in the 1920s.
Yes.
Like, they would just get newspapers, and that was the distribution follow the newspapers, right? That's why they needed like really incredible headlines, because the newsboys needed to yell it out.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And the newsboys got half, and then the newspaper got the other half, right? But those were entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it's fascinating when you think of it like that, because so instead of saying we always did things for money, I would say we always did things for stuff. Like commerce was like, I've got flour, you've got cornmeal, let's do a trade. Or I got chickens, you've got whatever, right? So it was basically a means to stay alive, right? So it's fascinating. So yeah, when you look at it like that, that's really true. And what I find so interesting about you is that, so your parents were Ukrainian immigrants, correct?
Yes.
So were you born here, or what age were you when you guys came here?
I was 12. We got to the United States on a very auspicious day. It was 7/7/77.
Wow.
Like, we land on this Pan Am airline flight from Rome, Italy, because we were living in this little refugee thing while we were waiting for some country to let us in, and the U.S. did. And it was like Pan Am airline into Kennedy Airport.
Holy shit.
And I'm like, what is going on here? It was like insane.
So yeah, so think about that. Like 12 is different than 3, right?
Yes.
Like 12, like you're an established, like you're like a Ukrainian kid.
Yeah.
So your beginning upbringing, like, and then you're here, and then it's like, did you live immediately like in the Bay Area? Were you in California?
No, I was in the Mecca of civilization, New Jersey.
Wow. Okay. So the reason why I find this so fascinating is because I'm sure, all right, I don't want to stereotype, but I am sure my gut instinct is Ukrainian parents, hard workers, fearful of a lot of things, right? And so like everything, I'm gonna imagine, it's kind of like how I felt as a blue collar kid. Making money was always hard. Like life was just hard. Like it was, nothing came easy. It always like was a ball busting hard, right?
Yeah.
So I remember you telling us this story though, like you, but here's the thing, Bill, about entrepreneurs. Some of us, I think, come through with a little bit more of it than others. Like you from the time you were a kid. So tell us about like the thing with the groceries, like when you had the idea, like you started making dollars when you were a kid. So you were young. So how was your language? Were you able, like, were you already speaking English and stuff?
No, but I'll take you to Italy, where
Okay.
now, it's my first time in this crazy country. I don't speak Italian, and I never learned Italian because I was like, I might as well get started on English. Right.
Right.
So I started learning English when I was in Italy, and I was a hustler. I was a little hustler. I was trying to figure out how to make things work. So I noticed, because in Italy, the gas stations, they didn't have attendants. You
Okay.
basically came in and you put money into this little slot, and then you push the slot in, and then you got whatever gas that particular currency got you. And I realized that, wait, when it rained, people didn't want to do that themselves. So
Yeah.
when it rained, I went to the gas stations and I would just put their money in, pump the gas for tips. So that was like my first job. And then, and I actually remember this, that the Italian kids were like, the hell is he doing?
Making money is what he's
And
doing.
so they were like, we're going to start doing that at regular times. So I was like, I was the immigrant kid. I took the rain shifts and they got all the other shifts because they would just kick my ass.
Yeah,
If,
but dude, you've been doing this though your whole life. You have been a leader and an innovator for like from the time you were a kid. And something just popped into my head. I was thinking about this. When I think about entrepreneurship as like businesses that become companies, that become corporations, a lot of money, a lot of people, like I don't identify with that. But if I think of entrepreneurs as being problem solvers, I'm like, okay, that I totally relate to. And that's what you were doing, is you have a mind that sees a problem and is curious enough to try and find a solution, but that not just benefits the people with the problem, but also benefits you.
yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I love this. And I think, all right, okay, you're a kid from the Ukraine, you're in New Jersey, dude, Stanford, music mogul, big shift, like big time business dude. Like how, like what's the trajectory for that? Like, are you in junior high or high school and then you just decide like how did Stanford happen?
So I don't even know how Stanford happened, but I think by the time I was in the 11th grade, even though I didn't really study, I wasn't one of those studious kids. I'm
Yeah.
not like a stereotypical good student who likes to open books. But I was always figuring out ways to win no matter what it was, right? Like if it's get good grades, and I think my game was, how do I get good grades without doing anything? That was the game that I was in.
Hustling.
Yeah, I was winning that game. And so, by the time like my junior year, I was like, I got to go to college, because it was like education was important to my parents, and it became de facto important to me. So I was like, all right, I got to figure out where I want to go. I'll figure out my senior year. And so my senior year, I went to the guidance counselor. I kind of lived in a somewhat of a, like, I mean, at the time we were calling it ghetto town, right? It was Elizabeth, New Jersey. I was like, Russians were a minority, but like a Russian Jewish kid and a white kid in my school, that was a minority as well. But I loved my experience, had lots of friends. And at that point, people were saying, like, college. And I was like, I don't know what I can do. I don't know where I can get in. So I was like, all right, I'm going to work all summer long so I can get enough money to send out like 40 college applications.
Wow.
So I just sent out 40 college applications thinking that maybe like one of these schools are going to accept me.
Dude, that's
I had no
amazing.
idea. I had no context. I didn't have like a network that would tell me. And then like the last week before applications, the US news reports came out of the top colleges. And I saw Stanford was number one. I was like, shit, I didn't apply to Stanford. So I like put it all together, applied to Stanford, and I waited, and like all these acceptance letters started to come in. I was like, holy moly, like everybody accepted me.
Dude.
And I still don't know why or how. And then the Stanford thing came in. I opened the thing and I was like, oh my God, you're giving me this kind of scholarship? Like, it became apparent that that was by far not only the number one school of the country at the time, but it was also the best possible deal.
Yes.
Wow. And so off I went. And the good news, it was further from New Jersey and from where I lived. And so that gave me a completely different like view on life and people. And, you know, I'm huge in entrepreneurship, and I think on some level, education is not always a predictor of success.
100% believe that.
And at the same time, being at Stanford at that particular school with that culture, with so many like incredibly accomplished people, it's like companies were started at a really young age. Like my next door neighbor was like, the heir to the DuPont fortune. Like my roommate freshman year, who was 7 foot, wound up playing for the New York Knicks. I mean, it's just like
world of possibility.
Oh my God, it was incredible. And that's where I think like the next level of entrepreneurship kind of woke up in me. I was like, there's no one is covering entertainment.
Yeah. So that's
like, all right, I'll start a little magazine, and that became like a weekly, and that became really popular. But I started a magazine because I had a DJ company. I was like, when I start a magazine, I could really create a party section, and my company's going to DJ a lot of parties, so I'll get more party gigs, right? So that
fascinating.
worked out really well. And then, but my favorite memory of that was, so like the daily newspaper decided now, well, shit, that magazine is doing well. We're gonna do a weekly insert that's entertainment. And then on April 1st, I remember this to this day, I got to dig this out. They created, the magazine was called Release that I ran. They created a spoof version of Release.
Wow.
And they distributed it throughout the entire campus. And because I was so involved, every single byline and every single article in that magazine was written by me. It was like this big thing. And I was like, and for me at the time, that was the biggest win of my life.
Sure. I mean,
100-year-old establishment at an institution starts to spoof what you're doing. I've arrived.
You've arrived because people are noticing. And there's so many points here that I want to jump off of. That very quickly, I just can speak for myself that when I left Boston and went to LA, talk about shift in perspective and point of view. Like that was huge for me. It totally changed the trajectory of my life. So I can really relate from being an East Coast kid who like ends up on the West Coast and going like, whoa. And that's what I always say. Like I have an East Coast attitude with a West Coast mentality. It's kind of like a West Coast vibe. And it's like a beautiful blend of the two. And I think I feel that in you too. And I really love that. And there was a story that I once read about you that I'm fascinated about, this whole thing about Stanford and then the DJing. And then I want to start a label. And I think this will be helpful for the people who tune in, because I think so many people, and I say this with true respect to my parents. But, my mother dying when I was 12, and then my biological father, my stepfather, just like not like just whatever, right? They're around still, but like whatever. They didn't raise me after, at all. It's like I have a freedom where I'm not tethered by what are my parents going to think. I don't have to worry about what anybody other than me and the divine what is going to think of me, right? And so I know that when you decided like, oh, after Stanford, I'm not going to do the typical thing. I want to start a record label, and correct me if I'm wrong. But I remember a story one time about you have to now have a conversation with your parents, your immigrant parents. Like, I want to go do this thing. And you did something really powerful. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said something to them like, well, first of all, I got to do this in a responsible way so that they can get on board, and you talk to them. But you said something like, for the next year or two or whatever it was, you're not allowed to like criticize me or nag me or make me fearful or try to talk me out of it. Can you talk about this a little bit? Because I think so many people get held back out of fear about what their parents or whoever is going to say about their dream.
Yeah. So I had a conversation with them and basically saying, like, this is what I want to do. I know it doesn't make sense. I know I'm getting this job for $6 an hour and I only have 10 hours a week that I'm working. And with a Stanford degree in computer science and Russian lit. Like it doesn't make sense, right? But I really want to do this, and can I just have 2 years to prove that I'm going to be a success? And for 2 years, let's not talk about it, right? And interestingly enough, I had a conversation about this with my dad, and it was a completely different perception for them.
At the time?
No, just this was like 3 months ago.
No, right. So, but I guess what I'm saying is, so in this conversation 3 months ago, they're now telling you what they were thinking at that time.
My dad didn't remember that conversation. My dad said that he's never been bought in, and even now that I've had success in the music business, he just completely regrets. Number one, that I went to Stanford. Number two, that I ever did music. It's like, it was like a little Twilight Zone episode.
Wow.
But I used that opportunity, even though it was not an easy conversation for either one of us. I think we were both hurt by that conversation. But I left that conversation afterwards thinking, oh my God, like, you know, I love him so much and we're such different beings.
Yes.
That like, there's just no frame of reference to even understand where I'm coming from on things.
Yeah.
And and it was a fascinating experience, and you know, it was deeply hurtful for both of us. And yet, you know, I feel like there's so much healing that happened for me that I feel a greater sense of freedom in my own self now, even though I've always done what I want.
Yeah, I think it's really, I often have, so I do this, my friends kind of laugh sometimes, I always go like this, what the fuck is happening right now? Like I do that like 3 times a day. So I feel like that a lot of times about like, when you have people, and this is the whole thing, I think we have an expectation that either because you fathered me or you're my sibling or we're in the same family, like whatever the thing is, that we're maybe having a tiny bit of the same experience.
Well, like that maybe we're from the same solar system.
Yeah. And I realize like, oh, no, right? Like I just think so often like, oh, and I came to this conclusion about you know, my fathers, and I kind of just thought one day like, oh, on some level it's not very loving of me to expect them to be able to do something that they're not capable of doing, and just not take it personally, and
It's
just
actually
like
cool.
Yeah, and just say like, oh, like I'm just, and it's not bad. I always say I'm just different than them. And so I can just now take any of those hooks of resentment or expectation or whatever, disappointment. And like, I was just like, oh, they're just who they fucking are. My dad's like 75 and he's not going to change. Like, this is who he is, you know, and I can still love him exactly as he is, but we have really different POVs.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find it.
Letting go of the expectation that
Bingo.
they are going to see me, that they're going to love me for who I am rather than some concept. And that's pretty empowering. It's like, no, like that is not their role. Their role is not to see me. Their role is to bring me up. Their role is to give me love. Their role was to nurture me through my, you know, growing experience.
Yeah.
And now my job as an adult is to love them for who they are and to not expect anything of them that they're simply not able to give. And you know, the amount of love that I have for them is, you know, ballooned.
But there's so much freedom in that. Like everybody we can just cut to shit and relax around each other and just go like, oh, just accepting people for who they are. And I think this is so interesting because one of the things you first said, I remember when I started the Big Shift coaching program, and I was just amazed. I was amazed by so many things, but I was really amazed at like watching, like, because it was a group program, right? And then just kind of watching how everybody is like, I'm an entrepreneur and I want to start this business. And they show up and we'd be on these group calls. And sometimes, and I'm not trying to be mean, I'm just being honest. It's just an observation. Like 6, 7, 8 months in, people are still crying on the call about the same thing that like we started with on week 1. And I thought, this is so fascinating. And one time on one of the calls you had said, hey, look, if you want to, I'm going to paraphrase, but it was basically like, if you want to know yourself, because I think we're talking about knowing other people, but I think in business and in life, you better know yourself. And you said, if you want to know yourself and all your bullshit, start a business. And so I thought it was so cool how you were talking about professional exploration is really mining the personal. So will you just talk about that a little bit, like for other people? And then I would be curious to hear what was one of the biggest things, positive, negative, good, bad, I don't label, that you learned about yourself when you started doing business too.
Yeah. So not every business is created equal. And, because I think about like in the sort of a transformational business or coaching businesses or businesses that are there to make a difference and serve people in some sort of a way. They're very different kind of businesses than somebody who's selling widgets. And like when we think about, there's a lot of people who have created a tremendous amount of success with gloriously shitty mindsets, with zero self-awareness, with like tunnel vision, blinders on, and everything that they do.
Yeah.
But the people that are starting businesses as coaches, the people that are starting businesses in some sort of transformational work and healing and all of that, it's a very different thing because on some level, you are the message.
Yes.
And you've got to be the walking embodiment of your work.
Double amen hands for the people at home who can't see me. If you're listening and not watching, I'm double amening my boy Bill Baren, because perk up your ears and listen to what he's saying. This is so important.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
And it's like when I think about, I was like, oh my God, as a coach, and for example, I'll use a coach as an example in your first 2 years in business.
Yeah.
You've got to learn how to coach. You have to understand the skills. You have to understand people. You have to understand yourself. You've got to be the message. You have to become an entrepreneur. You have to learn sales. You've got to learn marketing. You got to do all of these things while taking care of yourself, taking care of your family, taking care of your finances.
Dude.
It is a motherfucker of a path.
Dude, you ain't kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because it is such an interesting and varied path where mastery needs to be evolved into in so many different arenas, that it's like there's some gestation time.
Yes.
that happens, right? And so, and then you're like, why am I confronted with all these fears? Why is like every single issue and every single trauma that I've experienced in my entire life is coming to the surface?
Yes.
All coming up, right?
Yes.
And it's like, whoa, man, I never signed up for this. Right?
I thought I was going to be, people are like, I thought I was just here to make some money. Why am I crying in the middle of my bathroom floor?
Yeah, exactly, right? And that's the reason why it's like it's an accelerated program of personal growth, of spiritual development, and of human deepening.
Yes.
And I would not trade that for the world, even though there were times where I was kicking and screaming and going, what did I sign up for? And you know, and I feel like now that I've said, check, this is my journey. This is it. This is my life. So now every situation becomes that. And it's
Yes.
not always pleasant, but I feel like my understanding of who I am, my knowing of who I'm not on every
Yes.
level. I'm
Yes.
talking about from the deeply spiritual levels all the way to like more of the nuts and bolts, here are my gifts level as well.
Yes.
It's a really powerful thing. You know, it's like my wife and I, Gia, we have this, you know, we're not the only people in the world to use this term, but we're like, life is about staying in your lane. And it's like so much of suffering
Oh,
comes from us staying in our lane, right? Like, and how can we be grateful for every upset, for every pain, for every physical ailment, because they're just here to let us know that we are out of alignment with our true self.
double amen, you again, Bill. I mean, yeah, we speak the same language. Like I feel it so much. And I always say this, like, I am so grateful. Like I always say, I might not have gotten what I wanted, but I have always gotten what I needed. And I am so grateful for every time I was knocked on my ass, for every time I put myself on my ass, for every time that I like, just all of it, the bumps, the bruises, the ahas, the what the fucks, like all of
Yeah.
it. It's like, man, like what a really, you know, we talk about it like what life can be. I mean, Course in Miracles says it's all just a big classroom, but it's like when stones need to be polished and you take off their rough edges by banging up against each other, right? And this is what I think we're doing. We're always just kind of banging up against our own perception of not just who we are, but who we think, quote unquote, think we are. So I think it's so important when you say that, like, I'm coming to this realization of who I am not.
Right, right.
And that is just like, yeah. And I think that there's like this added pressure now sometimes with social media where people think they're supposed to be at the destination before they really are. Because when you say you have to be the walking embodiment of like whatever the solution is that you're selling, if you haven't figured it out for yourself, so now there has to be all this posturing and performing and pretending that you got it figured out. But people, like especially New Englanders, like we have really good bullshit sniffers. I'm like, I don't know, something's funky over there. Something's funky over there. So this whole concept of being in alignment, like your thoughts, words, and actions, if they're not in alignment, shit just won't work. And I'm sure you way more than me, because you've helped a gazillion like coaches kind of step into their power of wanting, like you always say, you know, helping people who do good now also do well. And that was such a powerful concept to me, because I remember at the Big Shift experience, like standing up and getting on the mic, and you were speaking on stage, and it's like Q&A, and I'm like, okay, look, so I get up to basically tell you how I'm not doing your program. I'm not doing it this year. I'm going to do it next year. And I basically say, I'm a yoga teacher married to a professional musician. And the room of like 600 people started laughing. And I'll never forget just being like, oh. And then hearing you say something like, you guys are like laughing like that is like you didn't call it a death sentence, but like that's a limitation somehow. And you saw it totally differently. And you pretty much bossed me out of the room, and you're like, go to the back of the room and go talk to a coach and blah, blah, blah. And you basically said to me, why the fuck are you going to delay your dream a year? Like, why are you going to put it off? And so I thought it was just so fascinating that I had put they were laughing as a reflection of some belief that I had, that I had the limitation. And you, like, I call it shaking the baby. You like strict the baby on me, and you were like, what are you doing? Why would you put this off? And that was a life changer for me, Bill Baren. You've had these pockets of saying things to me, but the things that you've said to me over the past 2 years have just been reflections of the way that you saw me that I couldn't yet see for myself. So thank you for that.
Yeah. You make it easy to see you, and that's that. Thank you for that.
You're going to make me cry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've always just felt like, you know, always believed that my mom has, when she left me, I often say that the space that was left by my mom leaving when I was 12, it created a lot of space for God, but it also created a lot of space for other teachers, other mentors, other people, because I was so blinded. She was the sun of my solar system, and I stared into her sun. And I think I would have just, if she had remained alive, I think I would have become stuck in my orbit. I don't know if I ever would have left Lawrence. I don't know if I ever would have went to BU or went to California. So I think her leaving when she did created a lot of room for really powerful mentors who had points of views and skill sets and things that I didn't have. And so you're one of these people in my life who I will always credit with, like, I've learned so much about business. I've learned so much about myself. And I'm just so grateful. And I wish, like, I know that you're doing things differently now, like Big Shift on some level, I say doesn't exist, but not in the same capacity. You're doing it with your new company. But I really wish everybody could have a little Bill Baren in their life. I wish everybody could have a little taste of, because you have a way of, you have a way of, like, how do I say this? You don't call people on their bullshit to be mean. You do it to set them free. Any thoughts about any of this?
I love people enough to tell them the truth as I see it. And, you know, the one thing, you know, I had this experience. I was leading an event. There were about 250 people in the room. And there's this, just this lovely woman who I'd met once before and who was really in her stories and was procrastinating. And I just knew that there needed to be an intervention. And it was like, you know, my intention is always, if I'm going to be talking to somebody in that setting, I want to make sure that they're transformed in some sort of way. And so I actually left the stage and I went into the audience and I spoke to her, and she would go into stories and I would go, no, look at me, no. And she wouldn't stop. She wouldn't stop. And then we got to the point where, because she was saying, you know, I'm going to do it very similarly. And it wasn't like to sign up for a program. It was just so that she does the work.
Right.
We'll do it in January. And I spoke to this coach right there, and he said, yeah, January sounds like a good idea. No, I was like, nope, it's you and me right now. No other conversation matters. And it took me, I don't know, it felt like an eternity just to get her with me.
Yes.
And then I was like, all right, it sounds like January is probably the right time. You're not ready for it now. And I was just like, and she was like, no, I am starting August 5th. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And I was like, thank you. And I left, and like the entire place just exploded. And I was like, and, you know, she, you know, and then I came to her afterwards because I was like, I wanted to make sure that I cleaned up the tough love, you know, in that moment. And then she said it was like, she posted in the groups, like it was most difficult experience of being coached and the most transformational.
Yep.
And so it's like, can we love people enough to tell them the truth with an open heart?
I 100% amen agree. People often say, like, you know, yeah, I'm like, yeah. They always say, people will be like, yeah, I need you to come and kick my ass. And I always say, well, okay, but can I also, like, hold your hand and be a little nice? Because I think that's it. It's like the tough love. Tough love has always been a great way that I've learned. But remember, there's two things there. There's tough and then there's love, right? And I remember I've seen you in action. I mean, I have seen you in action at so many events and at the retreats and on the calls and like whatever. And so it's been fascinating to watch the process. And I've also seen you do these things where like, how do I say this? Sometimes somebody's standing up exactly like you're talking about, like with their bullshit stories, and they're just like, fighting for their limitations, and it's exhausting. You're just like, oh my God. And I've just watched you kind of do what you just explained, but there's also been other times when like you're talking and then like you just stop. And all of a sudden it's like, like something, I call it your spiritual team, call it Holy Spirit, God, divine. I don't care what you call it. In a teacher, all of a sudden, just like something comes out of your mouth, and the look on the person's face who's receiving it is like, holy shit. How could you have known that? So you've kind of become known as and I'm doing air quotes for the people at home, but it's true, the business oracle. You've kind of become known as like, the dude with the business mojo, and you have a gift of insight, of intuition. And it's not that please hear this the way that I mean this respectfully. It's not that I find that so fascinating, because I think we're all able to channel, but it's your level of trust of that inner voice. And you'll just be like, I don't know, I'm just going to say it, like, this is the thing, but you like deliver it. And it's every time I've seen you do it, like I get giddy, like I get really excited, because I'm like, oh, he's about to drop some shit on these people right now. And people are just amazed. So can you just talk a little bit about this business oracle thing, and how you came to trust whatever you call it, the inner voice, the inner teacher, your spiritual team?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I did this little quiz around like intuition, and apparently I come out clairsentient, which is like a feeling comes out. It's not like words, it's not images, so that's like my intuitive sense. And so I'll speak about what happens for me now, and then I'll try to fill in the story. And I think for me now, it's like when that feeling inside is able to be quickly translated into words, where it's like, there's like, I'm experiencing something, and then like there's like this deep knowing, okay, this is it. And in those moments, there's no room for doubt. There's no room for doubt for any other truth inside of me. And I may share it, and I have this experience. Sometimes the other person goes, oh, yes, and like instant tears, or like this instant knowing, right? Like they were like, the resistance melts away. And sometimes what happens, it actually activates the resistance.
Yes.
And both things happen. And so after the intuitive and the inner knowing, it's like in that moment, I'm so clear that even if there's resistance, that resistance is false, that resistance doesn't actually exist, and that there's an opportunity for us in the moment to create a transformation. Right. And it's like, this has happened. I'll give you an example of this. This was like the most extreme case of this. So there's this woman, and she's a coach that helps women post cancer diagnosis.
Okay.
She's a survivor, and I can feel like in that moment, it was like, it was just like, it just hit me. I'm like, oh my God. It's like anger was a thing that created the cancer, and she's not aware of it. And it's the very thing that's preventing her from doing the work. It was all there. And she's like, I don't have any anger. And so I don't even know how it happened, because it was a blur. Like I became her ex-husband. And I embodied his energy, and then her anger came out, and like she was in my face, and then she hit me, she slapped me, and I baited her and asked for more. And I was like, and I just kept on saying, is that all you got? And the anger just completely melted away. And all there was by the end is love. And it was like one of those experiences of like, okay, well, here's what's a situation where there's a lot of resistance and there wasn't an inner knowing, but there's always a way to get through that and get through it in whatever way. And one of the things that people were saying to me afterwards was like, oh, I was like, what did you get out of it? Because I didn't know. I was scared. I was like,
Yeah.
what's the room feeling? Like, I'm just with.
You're following your assignment, man.
And what people said to me was like, oh my God, the commitment to just like stand in the line of fire and do whatever it takes to create transformation. And so it's like, and that's like right now, that's more important to me than anything else, right? Like, it's like, how can I be that for as many people as possible without like, I'm taken care of financially. I'm like, I don't need to be thinking about making more money or doing any of those things. It's like, how do I put myself in the situation where I'm in my gifts, when I'm in my zone of genius, and just doing the things that I feel like will impact one person, but as a result of impacting one person, we're impacting lots more people.
That is so powerful. And I think two things that came up while you were telling that story. And the first one was, I remember at Big Shift 2017, where it was a similar experience, but it was a dude. I know I'm friendly with him. I know exactly who it is. And I remember him standing up and he was really angry. And he was just like, like literally his whole physical body looked like it was getting puffed and red. And you basically said, I'm not afraid of your anger. And I remember you took him over to the side and you were like, let me have it. I will never forget this. It's a different story, but same thing. And it was like intense. But I also was just like, okay. And this is my second point to this. So I can attest to those of you who are listening, this is a real deal. Like I've seen him actually do this before, number one. Number two is that some part of you has to be willing to let go of the personal identification, because maybe Bill on some level, right, wasn't up to that task of holding that space and being fearless. So we have to be willing, I think, to surrender some part of our identification, or surrender. How do I say this? Am I going to be right? Is this going to be helpful? It's like just really the individual curriculum that A Course in Miracles calls it. So I've just got to show up for my assignment and trust that it was given to the right person, and not question, am I up to this task in my very clumsy humanness? But something greater is standing with me. So if you're, if it's too personal, you don't have to discuss it. But as far as your spirituality or your beliefs or your faith or whatever, do you have daily spiritual practices in place that allow you to kind of stand in that? Or have you just come to a place of just knowing and trusting enough? Like, I'm really curious about kind of your spiritual leaning.
Yeah. So as far as doing that kind of work, at this point, I'm not saying that I've arrived, but at this point, a spiritual practice is no longer needed.
Yes.
It's become unconscious competence. It's at a point where it's like, I'm at a place where it's a given.
Yes.
At the same time, it's kind of interesting because as you know, my wife is a devout student of the Course in Miracles.
Yes.
It is, by far the number one relationship in her life, and I embrace that, and I don't need me to be the number one relationship in her life.
Yeah.
And so much of my sort of spiritual growth comes from being a sponge in the vicinity of a committed student.
Yes. I think it's really powerful.
Yeah. And so, having conversations, it's kind of interesting. I'm a little odd bird in this regard. I'm deeply spiritual, but like, how can somebody who's like borderline agnostic be deeply spiritual? Like, I don't understand it, right?
Oh,
It's like,
I totally understand it.
yeah, well, maybe you could explain it to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so something that you're saying that's really important. With my students, I always tell them, like, I'm hardcore, non-negotiable daily spiritual practices, because it's very clear to me, like when the Course says, an undisciplined mind, an untrained mind can accomplish nothing. So let's get some stabilizers in place. But what I always say to them, like spiritual practices, and even, I don't have my books on the other side of the wall, spiritual practices, yoga, Course in Miracles, meditation, prayer, all of it, whether it's the books or the video, whatever you're, taking in, their whole goal, and this is the goal of, I think, of a true spiritual mentor and a true coach and teacher, is to get you to a place where you no longer need them. I always say I have the worst fucking business model going, which is I'm trying to get you to a place where you don't need me anymore. But that's really what I'm here to do, is to point back to you that you have exactly what you said. Daily spiritual practice no longer necessary because you've embodied it. And I feel like for me, it's very similar. I have a deep, unwavering faith, but it's not in, like, how do I say this? It's different than the faith of my childhood. I was raised Catholic, right? So I think there's something to not needing the external things anymore. You just become faith. You become it. So this concept of being like agnostic and not assigning power to external things, of just being the thing, it's like, I just think I totally get it. I'm like, I'm doing this Sunday spiritual thing. You saw it, right? So I'm just inviting people to just it's really about like deepening your relationship with God, AKA yourself, and starting to understand what I believe and why I believe and what does it all mean. And I think it's beautiful that you've come to a place, maybe not of 100% understanding, but a pretty deep understanding that we just are. Spirit just is. Like, the one thing I know, whether you call it God or not, is love is. God is. We complicate it, but it doesn't need to be that complicated, right? So anyway, so I totally get that. And I love that you have brought, like, there's something so powerful that you can be a really deeply spiritual person and apply that to your business practices, that you actually can make a lot of money when you get that money's just whatever you. So let me ask you this. How do you, I don't want to put words on you, I want you to tell the people, how do you view money in terms of what it is, how we use it? Like, is it an energy? Is it an exchange? Is it like whatever? I would love to hear what you think about this, because so many people get fucked up around money stories.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think I'm putting a lot more of my emphasis on really my work around money. I'm looking at, creating a course. I'm looking at writing a book. It's just like, it just feels right for me right now.
Yes. I'm excited, by the way.
Yeah. And it's like, but when I think about doing that work, I'm super excited. I feel completely in alignment. I'm like, and I feel like the time is now, like all of it is there. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But like, you asked me the question about money, and I was like, I'll tell you what my reaction was. Who gives a shit about money? Right. Like, that was my first reaction.
I get it.
I was like, and it's so interesting. I'll just tell you when I'm coming up. It's like, there is a threshold, right? It's like, this is what I need to live a comfortable life.
Mm-hmm.
And up until that point, it is almost, we're hardwired to have fear and stress around money. Like, that's hardwiring, because that's like the safety mechanism.
Survival, right.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then anything beyond that point, it's all our own internal shit, right? So money also becomes like my ability to receive.
Yeah.
Or my ability to have faith that when I'm fully generous, like imagine this, right? Like, I will give away everything I own into the places that I feel the world needs.
Mm-hmm.
And I have absolute faith that I'm taken care of, right? So, imagine a world where everybody lived that way. And we talk about the whole money laundering service, right?
Yes, yes. That was so helpful to me.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like, yes, like all this money come in, and the more, like, imagine this, like I have the capacity to have a shitload of money come through me.
Yes.
Right. So, like, think about this. Like, if all of the people that are conscious, that are spiritual, that are really wanting to do good work, the ones that have the best values in the world,
Yes.
right? Imagine us all being like this incredible money laundering service where all of the money of the world starts to going to places that are doing good.
Dude.
Wow.
Amen. Amen and hallelujah. Like that is a vision of, I'll never forget you saying that to me about how we were laughing because you're like, I don't know, man. I said, look, I don't feel like I have money issues, but I feel like there's just this thing so deeply embedded in my head. And you were like, I go, I can't even get to it. And you were like, I think you were a monk in a former life. And we were talking about all these different things. And then you said to me, all of a sudden you were like, listen, this is what I want you to do. I want you to think of your business as a money laundering business. And all this money is coming from like out there, like into you who want to do good, like you who have blah, 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 blah. And as soon as you said that, I was like, bring all the money my way. We are now open for business, right?
Yeah,
And it
exactly.
totally shifted it. And I think too, is like exactly what you said. Like when I know the exact, like, how do I say this? Like vibration of that attitude of who fucking cares about money? Because it's an illusion. It's something that we've made up. It's like in Monopoly, all the little game pieces, like that's all it is. It's just all a game. And we can assign the meaning that we want to assign to it. And I think so many of us people are so terrified. They're so bogged down in the meaning and the attachment that they've given to it. But I think that's the whole point. Like if you do these classes or these courses or you write this book, like that's the heartbeat of it. Like you get them in the door and then they sit down and you're like, who fucking cares about money? And they're like, whoa, wait. And then you get to help them to see the light. Like go to the light, Carolyn. Let me get to see it from a different point of view, you know?
Karen, so interesting. You know how, one of the things that's hard in the Course in Miracles for most people, including myself, is this idea that the body's not real.
Yes.
That the world is not real, right?
Yes.
Like, but money is almost like the perfect symbol for it, because it's like not real in the nth degree. It is, like at least this piece of wood that I'm like, it's tangible, right? Like but money isn't
Money's
tangible.
like it's like paper.
It's not even paper anymore.
It's
It's like something in the ether, right? Like, so it's like, oh my God, that's like the perfect example of like,
yes.
of what the Course in Miracles is actually saying. Like, money is so not real.
It's so true. And it's so fascinating because when we talk about A Course in Miracles, somebody was saying something to me the other day. I don't know if I was being interviewed for a podcast or something. And I was like, look, I don't start with none of this is real. I go, because people like can't, because they'll be like, don't tell me my kids aren't real. Don't tell me my suffering isn't real. Don't tell me I wasn't raped. Don't tell me I didn't have a murdered mother. Don't tell me like we're so attached to it being real. But in the attachment to it all being real is where the suffering or the free, like it's where the suffering lies. So the older I get, the lighter I become. And I think about enlightenment to me is just becoming lighter.
Oh my God, that's your weight loss book. There it
I know,
is.
right? No, but I just don't take, A Course in Miracles says don't make it real. But I always say, like, I try to ease that and I say, like, well, yeah, just don't make it all such a big fucking deal. And that's really what it is. And that's how I'm experiencing it. And I think since I've been able, I swear to God, since you said that to me about the money laundering business, there was like a light, it was like, click, like a switch went off and I was like, oh. And since then, like, I always say, like, my goal was to work with less clients, but like, for lack of charge more money. But I could do it because I knew what I was bringing to the table.
Mm.
And so you've helped me so much. Like, again, it's like why I wish everybody could have a way to experience you. And I think because of the way you're doing your business now, I don't know the access that the quote unquote public has to you. So you writing a book or doing something, I think would be so incredibly helpful, because the world, I think, benefits from a person whose only agenda is to be helpful, is to be a part of transformation. And you talk about this a lot about, I thought it was so fascinating about this concept of a movement and starting a movement. And everybody's like, I feel like all the hustlers right now are like, I got to start a movement. I'm like, no, you don't start a movement. A movement gets started because like the ministry, the mission, the mission is in alignment. But I think that you are the kind of person, and you've already done it. So I don't want to be, you've already started some movements, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if I should say I started some movements. I think a movement is something that organically develops in the morphic field of the illusion, and then from there, certain people that are vibrating at that same frequency of that morphic field wind up being attracted to it, and on some level become the spokespeople of the movement that already exists. So that's the way that I see it. It's like, this notion, like one of the things that was my spiritual practice 2 years ago was playing with this notion of that which you own owns you. Right. And similarly here, that which you claim as yours has the same power to own you, right? So I don't want to claim any movement as mine, but I want to be a servant.
Yes.
Of a movement that is already in place.
I love that. And I think that, but sometimes you can be the divine spark.
Yeah.
That ignites a movement, because I think that, somewhere in the Bible, and it's also somewhere in A Course in Miracles, but there's this concept of, I always paraphrase with The Course in Miracles, police don't come after me, but it's like, but I'm like,
is out strong, ironically.
Yes, I know. So I always say, like, the divine has no hands but yours, no feet but yours, no mouth but yours, right? And so people will say to me now, like nowadays, like, what are you up to? And I'm like, dude, I'm just trying to be the best assistant to God that there is. Like, that's my job. I'm just an assistant. I'm a lowly assistant, just trying to get my orders and like be the best servant, that I can be. And I think sometimes, because of the lens through which we see ourselves, we either see ourselves as too self-important, or we see ourselves as not up to the task. And so I think that, I think there's something of, this whole human experience, man, I think is just trying to point to the thing that we are all divinely up to the task.
Wow. It's kind of interesting as you're saying that. I was like, that's an interesting thing. Can one be supremely confident but devoid of egoic pushing?
Yes.
Right.
I agree. I think it's totally possible.
Yeah, I do too.
I think it's totally possible. So the last thing, you got shit to do. You're an important person. I can talk to you all day, but something that I want to ask you about, because I find this so fascinating. So my meditation teacher, Eknath Easwaran, he once told this story about this concept of winning at life. And this guy that he tells the story about was like a really talented poker player. And the guy used to say, doesn't matter what cards they give me, I'm going to win. It doesn't matter what kind of hand life deals me, I'm going to come out on top. And I believe that. I believe that no matter what's happening, and maybe this is arrogant, but I really believe it. I'm like, oh, no, I am totally loved. I am totally loved. So whatever's coming to my door, just because I might not have the capacity to understand how it's for me, even if I don't like it or don't understand it, I am so beloved that I know it's for me. So this is interesting, right? So I kind of have this idea. Now, I remember being so delighted and surprised when I found out that you were like a pretty badass poker player. And my sister actually deals cards. My sister is a poker dealer, and she, it's one of her gigs. And so I'm fascinated. And we grew up playing cards, 45s, which is a New England game, like da-da-da. My whole point being is this. What do you think it is? Because I think playing cards is kind of a metaphor for life in a lot of ways, and it's a big game. But what do you think that you possess, whether it's your mindset, your physical skill, body language, that makes you a really good poker player? Because you've been in like how many big time tournaments?
Yeah, I've played a few.
World Series of Poker, dude. Come on, don't be that. You know what I'm saying?
So, yeah, there's two questions here that I'd like to answer. So the first one, when I started to use poker as a spiritual practice,
yeah,
things really elevated for me. And so the first thing, it's kind of along the lines of what you were saying. I get the cards. And every time I get the cards, there's, when you look at the poker statistics, right? Like if you get ace, king, ace, queen, ace, 10, double aces, two kings, two queens, like those are the two cards that you've got. There's a hierarchy of what cards are good and what cards are not. Yep. All the way to 7 deuce, which is like the worst cards, right? Of different suits, right?
Yes.
And so it's like there's a hierarchy, right? And I always thought of it in this way. It's like, okay, how can I get the cards and be absolutely neutral in their quality? So that was the first aspect of it. And the second aspect of it was after the hand is over, how can I be absolutely neutral? How can I be absolutely neutral? Because poker is about deciding what moves you're going to make and when, right? And oftentimes, beginning poker players make the moves at the wrong time. Like they're not patient enough to be in a situation where there's an opening.
Don't you think that your business acumen, because you've known when to make moves, do you think that that's helped you in poker?
I think all aspects of life
kind
of affect and
interesting
inform the others, right? So but I think all of it, and it's like we were talking about business, and it's like I think the thing that I've been good at is seeing the need equal opportunity in any given moment. Right? It's like, how can I see the need and go, all right, well, and then say yes, because I believe I am the right person to make that move.
Okay,
right?
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
And it's the same in poker, right? Like, and sometimes I would go to a tournament. I'll give you an example. I go to a tournament. I'm like, all right, here's what I want to practice. Then when I get in the 20% of the worst hands, can I just maximize that experience and still see if there's opportunities? And I cannot tell you how many really big hands I've won with a 7 deuce. With like the worst cards.
Well, but there has to be something that you're projecting, because I do believe that part of poker is physical. Like there's an interesting thing to me about like, let me say it like this.
It's acting.
Yes, exactly my point. I was going to say, I cannot control, like, I have a terrible time not broadcasting and amplifying internal emotions on my face.
But think of it like 2 or 3 layered emotion, right? So I have good cards or I have really bad cards. How can I be the person that's projecting? No. That's projecting someone who is trying to act like you have bad cards, but really you have good cards. So somebody's going, wait, I think they're acting in the opposite way than they're really. It's like, it's
such a psychological trip is what I'm kind of pointing to. I think that there's something fascinating about it, because I always feel like when I think about, I love cards, like I love playing growing up, but I think, oh my God, that's so stressful. When I think about it, I even do this. I want to stop pulling at my shirt. I'm like, oh my God, that's so stressful. And I'm like, you can just sit there like calm as a fucking cucumber, like cool.
I think you can sit there calm as a cucumber while shit is going inside, right? And
Yes.
so that's the reason why it's actually a
Powerful
highly
practice.
intense but also tiring game, right?
You
Because
have to
you
have
want
mental stamina. You have to be mentally strong. And I wanted to say, hold on, there was something that just tickled my brain. It was about, okay, I know what I wanted to say. So I keep a quote on my computer by the famous writer Henry James. And it applies for me, I think, in all areas of my life, but very strongly as a mentor, spiritual mentor, and as a writer. And he says, try to be the kind of person upon whom nothing is lost.
mm,
And I think as a poker player, you also, like you said, like, because you have to be thinking, and I'm not a good poker player, so what do I know? I'd rather do like quarter slots or something. But it's like, okay, I have to be thinking a couple of moves ahead, or is it more just
it's
being
more than
really
that. No,
present?
there's so much is happening, right? It's what my cards are, what my position at the table is, what has happened with every player and their emotional state in previous hand. What are they projecting now? What do I think they really have? What moves should they be making if they had these cards? And what moves should they making if they had these cards? And are they playing the game or are they bluffing every move? Right? Like, is there any inconsistencies in their moves throughout this experience?
You cannot you have to pay such close attention is my point.
Oh my God! It's
So tell me if you can, why or what you get to decide. Do you love? Why do you love to play poker, or what do you love most about poker?
So, full disclosure, about 2 years ago, my wife and I made an agreement that I will not be playing poker anymore.
Okay, what did you love, past tense, about it?
So, but I want to explain what the very thing that I loved is the very thing why I didn't want to do it anymore.
Okay.
Because it's incredibly intense. And it's incredibly taxing and it's incredibly complicated. So what I loved about it's like it's a blend of psychology,
Yes.
strategy, and self-awareness, and then self-management, right? So all of those things
Sounds like
together.
business. Sounds like running a business.
It is, yeah, yeah. And so those are the things that I really loved about it, but it's really intense. Like you go to a poker tournament, and if you're doing well, you are going to be playing from like noon to midnight, and then you start noon the next day until it's like 10,000 people in the tournament, and everybody's going out, and right. So it's tiring, and it wasn't healthy for me.
Yeah, I think that I'm just fascinated by, like, when people have skill sets that, like, it's just, like my sweetie being a professional musician, and how music is just a language. Like, he tries to explain chords to me and why this is an A and that's a G and that's an A. And I look at him, and I grew up in a family of musicians, and I just get so frustrated. I'm like, sweetie, you might as well be Charlie Brown's teacher right now. Wah, wah, wah. I'm like, humans, emotions, like spirit talk all day long in my zone, genius. You try to explain to me why that's a C and that's a D, and you move I just go like, it like hurts my brain. So I'm fascinated when people I love, even people I don't love, have skill sets that aren't like super available to me. And so I find this whole poker thing like, because I think there's so many spiritual lessons in it. It's probably why I'm attracted to it, right?
Yeah, it
All
is.
right. So, look, I could talk to you again all day long. So the last thing, I just want to give you a chance to do your whole business oracle thing. And just for the people listening, if there was one thing, because it's not that I attract any particular kind of crowd. I think all different people listen to this. So it's not just specifically entrepreneurs or whatever. So I'm just going to trust you to just kind of tap into whatever you feel called to leave as your final whatever for the people who are listening. If there's anything you feel called to share.
Oh yeah. So this is we are so complicated as human beings. We simultaneously believe that we are more special than we really are. while at the same time believing that we're not enough. And oftentimes what I find in this world is that we want to bounce from one end to the next, right? Like, I'm feeling not enough. And the answer is to be more special in our own minds and the minds of everyone. But the reality is both of those poles are a complete trap, right? We are not special, and we are so much more than enough. And that as humanity, we're tapping into an infinitesimal portion of our true potential. And if we can just surrender to that next 1%, and then that next 1%, and that next 1% of our true potential, while simultaneously letting go of the need to be special, while continually popping that ego balloon that blows up with accomplishments or praise or any of those things. And that is the practice. And that is what I believe 200, 300, 500 years from now, if humanity is to exist still, that is the path that we're on as humanity.
There's so much that I love about that, but it would take us 20 more minutes to talk about, so I'm just going to shut my big fat fucking mouth.
Oh my God. For those of you who are not watching this but are listening, it's like watching you hold back from like another half-hour conversation is priceless.
You guys, you know how it is to be KK. I can't help it sometimes. I get so excited. Oh my God. Okay, so here's the thing. I know some people are going to be like, I love this dude. He talks about business and life in a way that so many other business coaches and mentors aren't doing. I need a little taste of this. How can they, because I know you're doing, so I just want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about the work that you're doing, or how people can reach you. I know on Instagram, all your, your little social media links I can put on the episode thing, but how can people get a little more Bill Baren in their lives right now? And are there any options? I don't want to put you on the spot. Are there any options?
There's not a lot of options right now. It's been a conscious process.
Yeah.
I'm doing a lot of work at Health Coach Institute. So if there's any sort of coaching programs, I'm all over those kind of things.
Yeah.
Last month I started doing the Instagram thing.
Yeah, I was so psyched to see you on there. I was like, there he is. There's finally more than one picture of you and Gia.
Yeah, exactly. So right now it's fun to figure out a new platform, and I'd love to connect with people there at my, Bill Baren. And then my podcast, The Big Shift, it's on iTunes. I'm going to be putting more episodes in a bit. And I know this isn't the answer to your question, but I want to do something with you, Karen. I don't.
Oh my God, you're just totally gonna.
I don't say that a lot, almost never. And but it's just I kept on feeling it throughout this entire conversation. So yeah, and I'll tell you some of the things that I am looking to do, and as a way to tell people what's on my mind, but also as a way to maybe invite you to do something like this. So I'm looking to create a one week experience in Bali. And right now the tentative title is called Awaken.
Yes.
And it's really like this, because I have this knowing about this potential of humanity that's being untapped right now. And it all starts with sort of individuals that could be activated. So really that's what it's about. But I want to be I see it as a lab, right? So I'm really into how lucid dreaming can be a way to solve some of the most important creative problems that we have. And it's a way of using lucid dreaming to heal some of our traumas of the past. I've been really into the Wim Hof method. I just did the whole ice bath thing just last weekend. It's freaking phenomenal of opening up the channels of potentiality. And so like, I really love that sort of thing. And I just want to create an experience like that. I'm probably only going to take 20 or 30 people through it. And because it's exciting to me. And there's so much right now in our world that is untapped, even like crazy stuff that I've never like tried before. Like, I know there's a way of like tapping in and using like things like psilocybin, or using breathing techniques to like tap into ways of like shifting our perception of reality. And so these are some of the other things that I'm really fascinated by.
Yeah, I remember when we were finishing our program with you, and I just kept saying to you, so for those of you who, it's a private joke, but I think it's really good, and people who watch the show will understand it. But the show Billions, and this talk about, all of a sudden my audio got really weird. Does it sound weird on your end?
You sound fabulous.
Oh, it's so strange. Maybe it's just on my end. I'm too afraid to pause it, so we'll just see what happens.
Yeah.
But so there's a show called Billions, and one of the characters, so two of the characters, the two main characters who I love, are talking about another guy that works with him, and they're kind of basing his ability to like hang at their level or be with them or whatever as like, is he a Wilbury? And if you're a fan, which I'm a huge fan of the traveling Wilburys with like Tom Petty and George Harrison and Roy Orbison and Mike from ELO, all these guys, it's like, oh my God. So you have this way of kind of like, I don't know, you set a standard for me of kind of like what a Wilbury is, right? And you gotta check all the boxes. So you check a lot of the boxes for me. And I just, did you see how I reacted when you said you wanted? I was like, oh, like I just got totally geeked out for a second there, because I'm just like, oh my God. I think that we're all on some level Wilburys, and we just don't know it yet. And like what you're talking about exactly is this untapped potential of the human mind, of the human spirit, right? And we've placed all these limitations on us. And it's almost like modern day astronauts. It's like exploring the great beyond, right? That we're not aware of. And I think like Wim Hof is a mad genius. Like, I just think he's incredible. And there's another dude named David Goggins. Do you know who David Goggins is? Look him up. So David Goggins is intense, but he's a former, I want to say he was a Navy SEAL, but he was really, really, really heavy. And he like lost all this weight, and he had to train his mind. And he is like he's hardcore motherfucker. You don't mess with Goggins. Like, people hire Goggins to like come to their house to like get them to cut the shit. It's like so intense. So there's a level though of like, even though your vibe is very like steady and calm, there's a lot of like, like in yoga, I sometimes talk about it like this, like bhakti. Like, bhakti is very devotional and beautiful, but sometimes shakti. And you're a beautiful blend, I think, of both of these energies. And so I just know that anything that you created would be like so incredible. And to finally make my point, when we were coming to the end of All Stars and that whole program was ending because you're shifting into this new thing, I remember being fascinated and asking you, like, Health Coach Institute, like, and I said something to you, I'm paraphrasing, like, so you think this is the way forward? And you were like, yes, I do. And now it's like that, it's like all the pieces are like, are like dropping into me, because it's beyond just that. And I don't know where exactly you're going, but I like where you're going. And I'm fascinated by it. So you guys, you can totally check him out. Oh, I have one more question. I'm so sorry. We can totally check him out at Bill Baren on Instagram. You'll be able to go to the episode. You'll see all his stuff. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, because I think so many people have drank the Kool-Aid that in order to be really successful, make a lot of money, do all these things in the illusion, that you have to have a huge social media presence. But you personally haven't. But is it because your business did? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, you as Bill Baren are kind of a separate, like, you're exploring social media as you, as an individual now. And I remember you saying to me, yeah, I'm just curious about what it all means to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk a little bit just about that, and then I'll let you go.
I just, so social media is an interesting thing. It's like the new catchphrase, right? It's a new thing. The reality is that it's not a prerequisite for business success for anybody, including coaches. There's all kinds of different models that are not needed. And, for me, it's like, imagine an entire world where we just did the things that fascinated them.
That's pretty much my business model.
And so like right now, from a personal perspective, I'm like fascinated with Instagram, right? Like, and I want to like post stuff and I want to share things, but I don't know what it's for, but it's just fun for me. And like, I went through a year where I was fascinated with Musical.ly. It's like now it's been bought and it's TikTok. It's another social site. And it's like, I was like, I might have been like, if anybody was watching my activities, they would think I was some sort of a crazy stalker, right? Like, there's like teenagers, right? But I was fascinated of like, what is everybody doing? What's the pattern of who's getting a large following? What's the pattern of like, what are the patterns of money making of people using that? And I was like, okay, great. And as soon as I decoded what it was about, I stopped being interested and I was out, right?
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, because I didn't have any desire for myself to post content on there, because that's not like, those are not people. But Instagram, I'm like, that might have some legs for me.
Yeah. I think that Instagram will be better with you on it. Because I think, because, well, I guess it depends on the content that you decide to share. If you're going to keep it personal, or if you're going to, and I often say that, like, I like being alone with my books. I'm on social media mostly because I have a business. And it's not that I don't love to share, but I remember the days when, like, we're of the age when we were alive when there weren't even answering machines. If you wanted to play with a kid, you called his house and his mother picked up the phone, or it just rang and rang and rang and rang. Like, everything was like, you had to go find out for yourself. You had to have an in-person experience.
Yep.
And so for me, it's like, again, that's a whole other hour-long episode about social media. But anyways, I'm fascinated that you're on it. I'm happy that you're on it. It's a way to stay connected, because a part of me was just like, I was getting a weekly dose of BB for like 2 years, And so now it's just kind of like, oh, cool. I can see what you're up to, and you post a little something, and it's nice, Yeah. So I'm curious to see where it all goes for you. And I'm fascinated about this Bali thing. And you know me, I'm always down for co-creating something, because I think we would have a really good time.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I appreciate you. So thank you so much for being on the show, you guys. Thank you for spending some time with us. I think you can tell how much I adore him. And I'm so happy that you chose. Look, you could be spending your time anywhere. And the fact that you decided to hang out with us two weirdos for a little while is pretty awesome. So you guys, that I'm going to say we in this case, because I know him and I feel like I can attest to him. We see you. We hear you. We feel you. We celebrate you. We appreciate you. We love you. And wherever you go, may you be a blessing. Bye. Hey, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of The Karen Kenney Show. I super duper appreciate your time, friendship, and support. And look, if something that I shared from my heart today somehow landed in yours, I'd love to hear about it. So please tag me on Facebook or Instagram or IG stories or wherever the cool kids are hanging out these days, and let me know what your favorite part was or what you found most helpful. You can find me over at Karen Kenney Live. That's Karen, KenneYlive. And if you're digging what I'm saying and you want to hear more, I'd be wicked grateful if you could go to iTunes and subscribe and leave a review, because you guys, that's how you'll help me to keep spreading the love. And if you can think of someone that could benefit from hearing this episode, please share it with them. I'd also love to stay connected with you. So if the feeling is mutual, please go to KarenKenney.com/freebie and download my free guide to building your spiritual team. Until next time, my brothers and sisters, keep living in the fearless flow. Know that I see you, I appreciate you, and I love you. And wherever you go, may you be a blessing.